So Sarah Bonser Blake, you're up next. Sarah has spent over a decade in animal management, having worked in zoos and sanctuaries across the world. Sarah's role in wild welfare encompasses many different aspects, as the creation, such as the creation of translation of animal welfare resources, helping to host training workshops with global project partners, and driving forward improvements for captive wild animals wherever possible. She loves working directly with animal care staff, recognizing that collaborations is key and big changes begin with baby steps. One of the biggest challenges we heard when we were talking to SARCs is opportunities for professional development at all levels of staff. Often capacity enhancement is just aimed at upper or middle management. So Sarah's presentation will explore accessible learning options and opportunities and resources available from wild welfare, and highlight the importance of continual professional development for people who work with animals and understand the impact that care and welfare has on an animal's experience in their daily lives. Sarah, whenever you're ready, please share your screen and begin.
Hey everyone. Okay, well, hi guys. Thanks so much for to SARCC for inviting me to speak today. I'm Sarah. I'm part of Team Wild Welfare, and today I wanted to talk to you all about some of the learning opportunities that we have for animal care staff, and the ways in which these resources can be used to drive forward animal welfare improvements. So firstly, a little bit about wild welfare, who we are and what we do. Our vision is a world where every captive wild animal is able to thrive and live a good life. And we achieve that in a number of different ways. We work to provide practical support to facilities around the world. We currently are active in over 10 different countries. And we work with any facility that houses animals, essentially, so zoos, aquariums, sanctuaries and rescue centres. And we work to bring welfare to the forefront of all decisions made. And that is a really important aspect to what we do, because if everybody working with animals is able to view their decisions, their management decisions through this lens of welfare, and focus their decisions that way, then it can have a really positive impact on the animals under human care. We work to build positive and constructive relationships. We very much know that collaboration is key and that condemnation isn't going to get anybody anywhere. So we are very much building positive relationships which benefit both parties, and we're really working towards keeping those relationships going long term as well. We do sometimes find ourselves returning back to the same facilities year on year, and we do have very long-term relationships that way. We do work on a significant range of resources, which I will talk you through in a minute. And we do work towards long-term sustainable change. And that is another really important aspect of what we do. Sure, we can head out to a facility, we can help with some might be, enrichment provision or enclosure changes and things like that. But what we really want to do is make sure that the changes that we are creating are in the staff themselves, and those changes can continue long after we have left that facility or that country. We do provide workshops and training, both theoretical and practical, both virtually and in country. So that is a whistle-stop tour of wild welfare. So I was really interested to see the SARC's visual representation of the identified issues which sanctuaries and rescue centres commonly encounter. And a lot of what was highlighted here is actually what we at Wild Welfare have found within our work as well. And what made me really happy is that many of our resources and current project actions are actually directly impacting these challenges to provide what we can now see as definitely very much needed solutions. So barriers to learning about animal welfare exist in a variety of sadly rather frustrating ways. So animal welfare as a science is relatively young. I always say it's only about as old as I am. So it is constantly evolving and changing. And what we thought that we knew 5 or 10 years ago might now actually be very different to what we know now, and it can be difficult to keep up. And actually, an example of that I always talk about is what I was taught about at university. For example, I was taught about the 5 freedoms, whereas now we have the 5 domains, which is much more significant. But I wasn't aware of that until after I left university. So because animal welfare as a science is a scientific subject, the concepts behind it can sometimes be presented in quite an intimidating way in lots of scientific papers and things like that. So it can be a bit difficult to apply these concepts to our daily management routines for the animals under our care. And that can be a real barrier. And then a lot of that information that is available, there is lots of information out there, but most of it is available in English, which is another limiting factor for those who don't speak it. And then as well as that, you've got the issue of information only being accessible behind a membership barrier wall or another cost associated with trying to access the information. So all of these barriers limit who can access animal welfare information, and that can potentially have a negative impact on animals under human care. So what we know as animal care staff impacts the care and welfare that our animals experience in their daily lives at a sanctuary or a rescue centre. And the way that we can continually improve care standards and management practices lies in the knowledge and confidence of animal care teams themselves. But as we heard earlier, one of the issues is that long-held beliefs in how primary care management should be conducted often dictates how animals are cared for. And these can be based on all sorts of things. It could be historical values. So I've certainly heard the phrase, "we've always done it this way." And some of you guys might have heard that as well. And that can be a real problem. It can also be based on cultural perceptions or even ego of some people. So all of these things can have an impact, and we should instead be really highlighting the scientific evidence behind them rather than any of the other aspects. So, for example, this notion that cleanliness equates to a high standard of welfare, but actually it results in sterile captive environments. So the more that we can improve accessibility to resources, the more that we can ensure that we base our care practices on science. And then understanding the differences between care and welfare is another really vital aspect for us to be able to objectively drive forward animal welfare improvements through our husbandry and management. And this is something that I struggled with a little bit, because when I was working with animals, I always assumed that just because my animals were well cared for in terms of they were clean and they were fed and they were acting relatively normally, that they experienced good welfare. But actually learning about the differences between care and welfare really helped me to understand how that might not necessarily be the case. So best practice animal care is about ensuring that animals are thriving rather than just surviving. And the more that we know and understand about animal welfare as a science, the more that we can achieve that. But how do we do that without accessible resources? Well, this is where wild welfare comes in. So all of our resources are completely free to access, and we are adding to our resource library all the time. So the first resource that I'm going to talk to you about is our Care for Us guides. And these offer advice on animal care in captivity based on individual species, behavioural and physical needs. We are continually adding to this library all the time. So if you do have a specific species that you want to know more about, or indeed species information in a specific language, then do let us know. And if anybody would like to help us with language translations, then we do always appreciate that as well. But you can see that we do currently have our guides in a variety of different languages, and we do have upwards of 35 species represented at the moment. So if you do want to access our Care for Us library, then do feel free to use the QR code on the screen right now, or just head to the resources section of the Wild Welfare website. So in the pictures, you can see the format which the guides themselves take. So firstly, we've got a brief introduction to the species itself. And then we go through specific behavioural needs of the animals or aspects of care which are discussed. And then we also highlight ways in which these can be provided for in a captive setting. So those are our Care for Us guides in a nutshell. So next up, we've got our enrichment page on our website, everyone's favourite topic of enrichment. So we do have this dedicated page full of ideas for you to try out. We've got lots of photographic examples of different enrichment that you can try. And the page also discusses really vital aspects of enrichment provision, such as discussing the what, the when, and the why. So we always I'm sure most of us are really passionate about enrichment. It's one of my favourite things to talk about, but we do need to have this deeper understanding of is it impacting the animal in a really positive way. We do also within this enrichment page have a bear specific portfolio on the page. So if you do work with bears and you want a few more ideas, then that might be a great starting place for you. So to access that enrichment page, we do have the QR code there. And as well as all the information on that page, we do also have our enrichment roadmap. And this was created in conjunction with the team at Wild Enrichment. And we currently have it in 11 different languages, including Korean, Vietnamese, Japanese, Hindi, Bahasa Indonesia, Khmer, Lao, and Thai. And it's designed to talk you through the entire process of creating effective enrichment, from picking a behavioural goal through to building a device and assessing its impact on the intended animal. And assessing that impact is a really important aspect because certainly when I was looking after animals and having fun creating enrichment, I again had this assumption that just because the animal is interacting with that enrichment device, it's a success. But actually we need to be going deeper into assessing whether it has a positive impact or not. The picture on the right hand side there also shows how excited I get when we print off the enrichment roadmap during fieldwork in our project countries. And I do know that this enrichment roadmap is now taped up in quite a few back of house animal areas to inspire keepers as well, which is very exciting. And then we do have our most comprehensive resource of all. So for those of you who haven't come across our programme before, here's a brief introduction to the Wild About Welfare Digital Education Programme. And again, you can access it through that QR code. So we officially launched this programme at the start of 2021, and it was created in conjunction with the John Matchig International Centre for Animal Welfare Education and the University of Edinburgh. And it's a programme to talk through all the essential elements of care and welfare for captive animals. And we made it to educate and empower animal care staff. And this empowerment is a really important aspect because we talked earlier about the importance of animal care teams, not just having the knowledge, but also the confidence to use that knowledge and the confidence in their own abilities. And we wanted to give animal care staff the tools that they need to better understand the welfare needs of their animals under their care and how the care that they provide is linked to the welfare that their animals experience. So the programme consists of 8 different modules, and you can see them all listed here. So each module has 2 complementary aspects. So firstly, you've got the learning content, and then you do have a set of interactive quizzes at the end of each module, and that will help you to test what's been learned, but also give you further examples. So for example, we couldn't really use video in the learning content, but there is the opportunity to use it in the interactive quizzes. We do also have an introductory document to the programme, and that just helps familiarise users with how the whole programme works and what it looks like. And then we do also have a glossary for definitions of terms which sometimes might be a bit difficult to understand. So that is how the programme looks as a whole. And within the learning content, everything is broken up into these manageable chunks of information. And we do also have scenario-based activities and reflective quick questions throughout. And this just encourages the application of the learning to your daily routines working with the animals, and also just a bit of a chance to have a little bit of a breather and just have a bit of a reflection on what you've just learned. And you can go through this completely at your own pace as well. So you can just dip in and out, or if you do want a very full-on couple of days to go through the entire course, then you can. And also upon completion, you can also email us and be able to apply for a certificate of engagement as evidence of continued professional development. So accessibility of the programme was a massive thing that we really wanted to be able to overcome, because we identified that as a massive barrier to learning earlier. So the programme is completely free to access. I do get a lot of questions about this, but there is no cost associated with the programme at all. You can log on right now and make a start on it if you want. It is also available across a range of different devices. So whether you've got a laptop, a tablet, a smartphone, anything like that, you should be able to use it and go through both the learning content and the interactive quizzes on those devices. And then another barrier that we talked about earlier was the issue of information only being available in English. So we did obviously launch it firstly in English, but then we have worked very hard on making sure that translations are available in a range of different languages. So at the moment, the program is also available in Japanese, in Vietnamese, and in Bahasa Indonesia. And then we do also have Thai coming soon, hopefully launching in the summer of this year. So with the program as a whole, we've seen loads of really amazing stats behind its usage. And actually, this is a slightly old slide. So we have seen it used in nearly 70 different countries now. I think we're on 69 different countries at the moment using the program. So that's really exciting to see. It's had over 16,000 downloads, and we are actually seeing it being used in over 30 different facilities, and these range from universities and colleges across the world to zoological facilities, sanctuaries and rescue centers, and then even conservation projects as well. And you can see here from the quote that we were given by Arslan that it is having this tangible impact on animal care in facilities all over the world. It isn't just increasing knowledge, but it is also encouraging this change to promote positive welfare. And you can see some of the tangible impacts there. So Arslan's been installing boulders and platforms in his lion and bear enclosures, and also creating more hiding places and visual barriers for some of his hoofstock species. And this brings us to the next part of the e-learning course as a whole. So after the success of the digital version of the course, we wanted to take it a step further. And this brought us to our in-person guided training program. And the idea is that we actually go through the course as a team together in a facility in person. And we go through it as a 5-day intensive course where we go through a module or two during the morning session, for example, and then in the afternoon, this allows us to undertake practical activities based on what we've just learned. So it's a great way to learn something and then apply it pretty much straight away. And it was a fantastic way to run through the course. So these are photos from our trial run that we did in both Laos and Vietnam at the end of last year. And in the pictures, we've got one of my colleagues running through an enclosure assessment activity, which we did after going through the enclosure module. We do also have me going through some of the interactive quizzes, and we do also have the certificate presentation at the end, and everybody was very excited to receive their certificates. So the idea behind making an event, a learning event, an in-person event out of the training materials was quite a few different ideas behind it. So we really wanted to give this opportunity for continued professional development for staff. But what we love about this is that it's got the potential for modeling behavior. And we see this particularly when we are out in the field doing the training course. So in this example, we did train a lot of middle managers and higher level keepers with the idea that they would be able to take a lot of this knowledge back and distribute it among the rest of their teams. And that can encourage this further participation, but it can also surpass other barriers. So if not everybody in the team does have access to internet, or if indeed they're actually unable to read, then they are still able to access the information through other members of their team. But it is certainly something that we want to take into these facilities and be able to disseminate amongst the teams themselves. Now, the course itself, going through it as this guided training opportunity, is a great way to get all staff reading off the same page, essentially. It's helping to understand those basic animal welfare needs and how those relate back to all our husbandry practices and decisions. So it's getting everybody on the same page and being able to set off from that level of scientific understanding to make those decisions. And what I loved about taking people through this guided training was that there was so much sharing and discussing during the courses themselves. So it wasn't just from us, it was actually from the people taking part, and they were discussing what they knew, what they'd experienced, and being able to share that with others and people that they'd never met before as well. So it was a brilliant networking opportunity, and there was a lot of informal learning opportunities too. And it really was wonderful to see these knowledge exchanges happen between these different teams. And our ultimate aim with going through this course, and particularly guided in person, was to understand and answer the why. We know that animals benefit from enrichment, but why do they? We know that good nutrition is an important aspect of animal welfare, but why is it? How does it all link in together, and why does it all matter? And that was a really important aspect for us to be able to share within the training course. Now, we wanted to make sure that the training program isn't just a good thing for staff training, but that it is also having a tangible impact on animal welfare. And we know that gaining a good understanding of the fundamentals of animal welfare science is critical to ensure these optimal husbandry practices. And this knowledge enables users to drive forward these practical management changes. And during the training course, we had a lot of learners that were clearly inspired to make the changes to some of their care practices. And a lot of them actually wrote down lots of ideas as we were going through the content together. And these ideas might have been environmental changes, nutritional changes, or indeed providing more opportunities for specific behaviours for the species under their care. And then the final resource that we have is our core fundamentals standard. So part of what we do at Wild Welfare is we conduct audits and also auditor training for organisations. And this is upon invitation from a facility. But we use the core fundamentals standard, which we actually created and we update every year. And it's used as a benchmark to measure against. And this is a great way to highlight gaps and opportunities for welfare improvements. So this standard is based around the 5 domains of potential welfare compromise model, and it is again accessible on our website if you do want to go through it. So it is quite a comprehensive document, but it is a great way to be able to understand what to measure against and how to prioritise what welfare improvements might be needed. So some of the points that we also measure against within the standard do include staff knowledge and experience. So it is also another reminder as to the important link between staff knowledge and animal welfare. So none of the resources that we do have available would be possible without the support of all the donors listed here, as well as all our wonderful volunteers and partners who have assisted with proofreading, with translations, and all the other assorted tasks associated with shaping this resource that we do have. So a massive thank you to them. And if anyone does have any questions or suggestions or is willing to help us with any translations, then please do let me know. My contact details are right there. Thank you so much for listening. And if you do have any questions, then please do feel free to give me a shout.
Thank you very, very much for that, Sarah. As you know, I've been an admirer of wild welfare for many years. And I think you raise a really good point in that in both science and animal welfare, most things have an English bias to them. So the fact that you've found a knowledge gap as an organization and have been able to start filling it in is an incredible thing. And I think wild welfare deserves a lot of thanks for that. So thank you very much for your work and thank you for your presentation. We, of course, have many questions for you. So our first one is, what is your process for identifying the species to focus on in developing the species-specific guidelines?
That's a great question. So initially, when we first started putting them together, it was based a bit more on staff knowledge. So, for example, we've got a herpetological expert that works with us. So we put a few guides together based on his knowledge of reptiles. I've worked a lot with primates and certain bird species, so we put together that. But what we wanted to do is actually make it more relevant where we could. So we were able to access some some information about the most commonly kept species. This is within zoos rather than rescue centres, but obviously if anyone does want to share what species they commonly find, then that could help us in our direction for the care guides as well. But yeah, we used these this information that we had access to narrow down which species we might want to focus on because of the impact that it might have. So we know, for example, that ring-tailed lemurs, Humboldt penguins, some of these specific species are very, very commonly kept within zoos, and that can be across different regions as well. We do have regional information, so we wanted to use that to focus in on what species we look into next.
Brilliant. For a small SARC that may not have the resources to have people come in and do an audit, And some tools can be intimidating, especially when they're translated. They can be very big documents, and then, where to start. Are there tools available for self-assessments for sanctuaries and rescue centers as a starting point to begin ratcheting up welfare incrementally?
That's a very good question. I'm sure that there are some out there. I'm not as aware of the specific information in specific documents. Obviously, we like to work as wild welfare. We like to work both bottom up and top down. So we do bring in information at kind of both angles. So, for example, the e-learning program is a great way to understand welfare, and that would help you to prioritize the improvements that you might want to make yourself. But in terms of audits themselves, I don't know of any simplified version. However, what we do as part of wild welfare is audit training. And again, there is a small cost associated with that. So that unfortunately isn't quite free, but it is something that we do. And we actually have a series of presentations and practical exercises to talk people through the auditing program step by step. And that can break it down to make sure that it isn't as intimidating.
Sure, it's fine, but why isn't it?
So yeah, I think it's a good point you made, especially with the e-learning program. When I certainly went through it, it certainly starts to give people the opportunity to critically think about the issues that they're coming across each day.
Absolutely.
One last question. Rescue centers can be such under-resourced, overstretched places, and it seems that as much as staff would like to take time to familiarize themselves with guidelines and welfare standards, they just don't have the time to do this. For instance, having a huge animal to keep a ratio. They wind up providing only the most basic care, yet it's incredibly important. How do you see overcoming this problem?
Oh, that's an excellent question. Obviously, resources are, again, another massive barrier because we don't have infinite funds to be able to hire more staff and that kind of thing. And that's something that we can't necessarily overcome straight away. But I think as more people realise the incredible work that rescue centres and sanctuaries are doing, then hopefully they will get behind it financially, and that might be able to impact the amount of staff. But also that critical thinking of, we do have a lot of animals, but do we actually have the capacity within our staff to take more in? Because ultimately, if we are doing that, then the welfare of all the animals currently in those places might actually diminish because of a lack of staff time. So that again might be one of those critical questions. It's a difficult one because we obviously know the need is massive, but at the same time we do need to be we do have that duty of care towards the animals already in those centres. So it's a very, very difficult one, but yeah, there's some very difficult decisions that need to be made on that one as well, and sadly no easy answer, unfortunately.
No, and I think that's something we're going to have at the panel discussion at the end to see what some of those solutions may be. And interesting that you bring up decision making.